I'd like to call the Board of Public Works meeting of July 13th to order and ask if anyone besides LCAT is recording the meeting.
Bob Parent for the purpose of recording minutes.
Okay. Seeing nobody else is doing that, we'll move for a motion to approve the minutes of the meeting of 6/23.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Also look for a motion to approve the executive session minutes of June 23rd.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion on those?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Approved and approved. And we'll move right into the superintendent's report.
Thank you. I'd like to bring the board up to speed on a couple of staff updates. One is that Frank Mirandi is going to be returning next Monday the 20th, from his medical leave and returning with no restrictions, so he'll be back with us full-time at that point. The other staff transition will be that Ryan Daly, who is the GIS intern who's worked for us last summer during school breaks and again since he graduated from Westfield State College with a planning and GIS degree, will be leaving us at the end of this week. He secured a full-time job working for Mass Mutual in the records department, and again will be leaving us. He's going to be sorely missed. He's done a lot of things since he's been in. He worked in developing hydrant inventory last summer. He has digitized all of our line striping so that we now in the GIS have a record electronically of where we historically have done line striping over the years. He has put all of our pavement improvement projects over the past 10 years into the database, so we have his historical and a graphical record of that as well. He has updated all of our water and sewer system updates, all the tide cards, all the various sketches that Roy Esposito has developed over the past number of years. He's got all those into the GIS system. Most recently, he's been helping us set up a database by which we can capture the location, the type, and the condition of all our street signs. And it's actually something that you can utilize on your handheld phone. And Ryan will be starting that, but obviously won't be able to finish that, so we'll transition that to someone else so that we can go through and be able to locate every single street sign that we own, come up with, the total, how many stop signs, how many speed limit signs we have, etc., and also take a look at what it will take to bring those into compliance with some new federal requirements that we are.
It's changing, right?
It is. The terminology that's talked about is something called retroreflectivity, which means the way in which the signs reflect light at nighttime, so they become easier to see, particularly with those people that might have diminished vision driving at nighttime. So there are some new requirements. There's not a hard date by which we have to come into compliance with the new requirements, but it's like American with Disability Act type compliance, that you really need to have a plan for bringing a community into compliance and be making progress on that plan if you want to protect yourself from potential liability issues in the future. Wanted to give the board an update on the one item you may not be aware of, which is we've been having some difficulties with the traffic light at Maple Shade and North Main Street. And as Mr. Wilson saw today, we were out there taking a look at that light. What it finally appears to have happened is that a couple of the loop detectors on the straight-through approach at Maple Shade have failed. So what was happening would be that you would come to the light and the people on the westward side of the intersection would get a green light to go through, but Maple Shade wouldn't turn green because they operate together but independently, so that Maple Shade only turns green if it's called to turn green. What we've done on a temporary basis until we can get the loops replaced is we've actually tied the Maple Shade and the Westwood activation together, so that any time that Westwood activates, at least Maple Shade will activate. It may not activate for as long as you might want to if the queue on Maple Shade is longer than the queue on Westwood, but at least it will go through every cycle. It's moving.
I was at that light Sunday morning and
Right.
It wasn't doing nothing.
Right. What happens is the loops were working, but you had to go 6-10 feet past the loop detector to activate the loops. And that meant that if a vehicle was taking a right-hand turn, it would activate it. It would appear that the signal was working correctly because that right-hand turn sort of put the sequence in motion. But if it was just a straight-on vehicle, that vehicle would wait and would not be picked up by the loop. and would go through a half dozen or more cycles without the light turning green. So we had Northrop out there over the weekend. We had them back there today. We troubleshot things today. We believe we understand what the problem is. We put a temporary fix in place, and again, the more permanent fix is to cut in new loop detectors in the pavement, and we're talking to Northrop right now about schedule and timing on when that could be done. One thing I wanted to note that we've been working on at the transfer station lately is that we brought in a rental screen to begin screening the large piles of compost that have been curing over the past half a dozen years. And we've made a point of not doing everything we can to hold on to that compost material as long as we could, because we understood that we would need it for the landfill closure activities. So in getting ready for the landfill closure activities now, we're going through and screening those compost piles, and it's going pretty well. As long as we can screen dry material. With some of the weather lately, it's been touch and go for a couple of days. We've had to back away from it, but it's working well. We're actually getting a better yield out of the piles than we expected. You typically screen the piles and you might have 2/3 of the pile might be readily usable compost, and 1/3 of it might have to go back into the pile for additional curing, or might have materials that don't break down very easily. We're finding we're probably getting at least 3/4 of the material, if not more, is a material that's ready, good quality compost material that we ultimately will be blending with other soil to make a vegetative growth material to go over the top of the landfill as we're closing that. So you'll see those piles will now be starting to shrink, and there'll be a large compost pile that's starting to build. As Mr. Collins will talk about in a couple of minutes, and I'll talk about a little bit now, it was a pretty busy day today. We had a number of things kicking off. Our calendar year 15 paving project kicked off today with Lane Construction being in town. They started with the milling of Maple Shade Avenue, and what we did, just for people's benefit, is what's known as gutter milling, where we mill basically the outer thirds of the street and leave the middle third of the street largely untouched. And what that does is it allows you to increase the cross slope on the roadway. It, one, keeps more material in place, and then secondly allows you to increase the cross slope so that you get a better overall drainage to the gutters when you're done. We did, from Elm Street to the entrance of the school, we did do full width milling, because we had to adjust the grades to make one of the existing catch basins work a little bit better. So in order to do that, we actually had to take the entire road down a little bit through the milling process. But once we got past that cutoff to the school, then we went to the gutter milling and held the gutter milling all the way to Pleasant Street. From this point going forward, activity won't be as intensive on Maple Shade. Caracas Construction will be on site there, the subcontractor working for Lane Construction. They will be in tomorrow installing silt fence down towards the Pleasant Street end of the site, where we have a small brook that comes close to Maple Shade. They'll be starting to work on under drains that are going to be installed on the uphill side of the roadway, just on the base of the hill, to try to intercept some of the water that currently drains below the roadway. And they're going to be working on adjusting structures to final grade over the length of Maple Shade. That will likely be happening through most of this week. We are tentatively, and we don't have a definitive schedule from Lane yet, but we are looking towards starting to then get out into Prospect Street next week. And one of the more significant things we'll be doing on Prospect Street is, as we get down by the low point down by the kennels, we're going to be reclaiming, full width reclaiming, about 600 feet of Porter Road, excuse me. Yeah, Porter Road. Yeah, wrong P Street, Porter. We'll be on Porter Road at the low point in the roadway by the kennels, and reclaiming about 600 lineal feet of the roadway there, which means we'll be turning about 600 feet of the roadway to gravel, which allows us to, one, improve the gravel sub-base that over the many years of frost heaving through there has been degraded. It will also allow us to lower the grade at right of that cross culvert to make the drainage again work a little bit better there, so the water can get to the culvert into the catch basins better than it currently does. One of the concerns at that point will be that we'll have about 600 feet of gravel roadway with paved roadway on both sides. So what we're going to do is we'll take the message boards that we have that work 24/7, and we're going to install them on both ends of that gravel section with some pretty bold signs that are going to warn drivers to slow down, because you'll come over that hill on Porter, and if you're not aware that you're going to be hitting a gravel section of roadway, it could catch you by surprise. So we want to try to call as much attention to that.
Could have some fun.
Could be. We don't want people to, we want to keep people on the roadway. So next week, we're looking towards Porter. Probably some paving activities by the end of next week, probably the overlay for Maple Shade. And then after that, looking towards Hamden, and then after that, we'll have all the work that involves the schools completed, or is close to the schools, by the middle of August, if not sooner, and then be working on some of the other roads that we're going to be working on. We have been working pretty hard to try to communicate to people regarding what our schedule is as we get schedule information. And as the board likely knows, we did, for instance, send a message out Sunday night to everybody in town letting people know that Maple Shade Avenue was going to be closed. That type of approach seemed to have worked pretty well with Elm Street, trying to give people advance notice so they could plan in ahead to know that they should just try to stay away from the work area if they can. We had no issues on Maple Shade today, so we'll continue with that type of approach as we go forward. Trying to get the news out in the press, trying to, where it makes sense to do direct calls, do direct calls. If there's a targeted neighborhood that would be impacted, we'll reach out just to that targeted neighborhood. Whereas in the case with Maple Shade, it really potentially affected most people in town. So I felt it was prudent to get the message out to most people in town. One of the streets that we're going to be paving, Prospect Street, I got that one correct, yeah, Prospect Street. As the board probably knows, Columbia has finished with their main gas line replacement. That goes basically from the Rotary up to Crescent Hill. And then they're now going to be moving on installing the services across the roadway. Like their main installation where they used a directional drilling technique, they'll be using a similar type of technique to push the services across the roadway. So their excavation of the roadway is going to be relatively limited. And we've been fortunate, I think, if you've taken a look at what they've done, even where they've had an impact, they've been pretty good at cleaning up behind themselves as they go. So everything really has been graded off and cleaned up really at the end of the workday, so they're really not creating much of a mess. Another thing that kicked off today, Green Mountain Pipelining was in town, now moving on to the second phase of their work, which is the manhole lining and sealing activities, where they're working on the vertical faces of the manhole, first injecting material through the manhole to seal off any leaks that might exist, and then they come in, they coat the interior of the manhole with a cementitious and epoxy material on the interior of the manholes. That work is primarily, as we talked about before, essentially going from Town Hall through the cross-country right-of-way on the main interceptor line, heading out towards Stop and Shop, which is the largest pipe that flows eventually to Vineland Pump Station before it leaves town. Let's see, we've talked about what's known as RAP, or the pothole money that the town and every community in the state received this year. We had a deadline to spend those funds by the end of June. We did, and we did that primarily through probably about 2/3 of the funds were spent on pavement patching activities that the DPW did around town, and basically just paying for materials, not paying for labor, because that's part of our budget, but paying for the pavement materials itself that might normally have to come out of our budget, out of our operating budget, and the line striping work that was completed town-wide. So we're in good shape there. We have to get the paperwork together in the next week or two, get it submitted to the state for reimbursement, and then after that we'll be all set.
That's great.
Then lastly, we did receive our bids. There was one bid for the micro-servicing work that we talked about on Westwood Ave. It was from the company that we've been dealing with, Seal Coating, who's the company that did the crack sealing work for us this spring. We expected to get a bid from them. We weren't certain if anybody else was going to bid on it because it's pretty specialized. There's a couple of companies that do it, but if they're busy, they may be busy doing other things. Given that Dan Murphy was primarily involved in that one, I really want to wait until Dan gets back into the office tomorrow to go over the bid results with him, make certain that we're confident with things before we make a recommendation. So I put that on hold for tonight and expect to come back at the next board meeting to go through that. And then standing in for Mr. Fenny, who's on a well-deserved vacation for the next 2 weeks. His staff have a lot of projects that are ongoing and a lot of projects that he's kicked off before he left. Armani Contracting, who is the contractor who is doing the drive-it repair work at Birchland, they began work today, mobilizing, essentially scoping out the project. And over the next couple of days, we expect them to start first with the pressure washing of the areas that are affected. And once they complete the pressure washing, really have a much better understanding of whether or not the repairs are as extensive or less extensive than we had expected. Bruce and I spent some time going through it on Friday, so I've got a good first-hand feel for what that looks like. So over the next 2 weeks, we'll be able to keep Armani going with Bruce's staff as well, who's going to keep an eye on them as they're working. This Friday, we are going to be shutting power down at the Meadowbrook School. We've talked about in the past where, since we did the service replacement last summer, we believe we're seeing some trends for higher power usage at Meadowbrook. One of the things we're going to try to do is to isolate to see if there's any line side issues. In other words, you might have a grounding issue between the school and the transformer that might be causing power essentially to be going ground and appear to be used by the school, but actually might be consumed before it gets into the school. And that can be tested fairly simply by shutting the power off at the building. Since the meter is between the building and the transformer, see whether or not the meter continues to spin, essentially, to see if it continues to use power when the building's been isolated. If we don't see any energy consumption, then we can really focus our efforts inside of the building. But we really want to isolate the outside work that was done by the contractor while they're still under warranty to make certain that there's no issues related to what they did.
Run that by me again, the meters where?
The
Meters at the school, right?
The meter is between the transformer and the school building.
But at the school?
At the school, correct.
So
you
how
shut
will the
buil-
meter, how will the meter turn?
You shut the building off.
If we shut the building off, if we have a leg that is we've got straight current that is going through to ground, and you can have that. If you have an active ground, you can actually be consuming power by running power to ground that will be seen going through the meter.
Right.
The meter's
Even-
at the school, right?
It's outside the school. It's at the transformer, but it's
Oh,
downstream
it's
of the
at this-
transformer.
Okay.
So
As long as it's between the meter and the school.
correct.
No, as long as the ground fault issue is between the transformer and the meter, you'll see it. If it's after the meter, you wouldn't see it, right?
I think you're correct, and I believe I'm incorrect, and the meter is, I believe, at the building. Yeah, I think more correct, that because we've been working with Eddie Legou going through this, and Eddie is actually the gentleman that suggested we, I do see your point, that if your transformer and the meter
Transformer,
were right there,
meter.
yep,
If it happens between the transformer and the meter, we're not gonna see anything. So the meter must be closer to
The building,
right.
or on the building.
But I think your first point was correct, that
What's
if
that?
you ground in between the
Transformer.
Yeah, it's after the church.
Actually, no, it
meter's
has to
gotta
be
be-
after.
the meter's
The meter
gotta
has
be
to
On the
here.
building, so
Right.
like if you got a 50-foot run to get to the meter, if there's a bad leg in there,
And then the shut-off's gotta
it'll go to
be.
ground.
Right, the main disconnects at the building itself.
So cut the main disconnect if the meter's still spinning.
Yeah, I think your transformer,
It's like listening
meter,
for a water
then
leak.
building.
Something,
Yeah,
anyways.
yeah, and it's the same analogy.
Okay.
If you had a water meter at the street and your service was leaking, you would see that leak in the service. But if you
Right.
put the meter inside the building and the service leaks, you never see it.
Right. Got it.
Thanks, Tom. So we're doing that this Friday. Again, really the main motivation is to make certain that we can identify whether it's on the line side, if there is an issue, whether it's on the line side or the building side. We have a recording, it's a combination recording amp meter, voltmeter, a power meter essentially, that we've moved around the building and all the circuits. We've got a pretty good idea of which circuits consume the greatest power and have the greatest demand, and what time of day that typically occurs. It typically, for instance, is at lunchtime, because the big thing that kicks in is that the supplemental heaters for the sterilization equipment
Mhm.
at the kitchen. So during lunchtime, you see a big spike there because those are all electrically driven booster heaters that, boost water temperature beyond what the ordinary water heater provides. So, if we don't find anything that's a sort of an isolated grounding issue, then we start looking at the loads and start trying to see if there's a way to bring some of those loads down. Another item you've heard about from Bruce in the past that will be happening this week is the hot water heaters at the high school. The hot water tanks at the high school. They're ready. We're having them brought to site on Wednesday. Joe and others will be starting with the installation of that on Wednesday of this week. So Joe Dunn and everybody else will be pretty busy on that once they get on site. Lots of other miscellaneous things. I won't bother mentioning them all because it's a long list of items that Bruce has for his guys to keep busy over the next 2 weeks. A couple of things we are working on right now since funding was approved for replacement of vehicles 77 and 78. We are looking at two options there. We've already got pricing through the contractor or the supplier who's on the state bid list, and we've got a hard number from them, and we're going out there and we're looking at bids from outside suppliers as well, just to see whether or not there's an expediency advantage of working through the state bid list, and if it's a reasonable price, that's probably the direction that we go. But if we find we can do better going through a formal bid process, we will go through a formal bid process. Our goal, obviously, to have those two vehicles ready for the winter time, because they were, they're pretty critical. We kind of cobbed together a vehicle last year to give, blanking out.
The router machine.
Mike Shapiro, a vehicle that he could plow parking lots with, but it was really a cobbed together vehicle that we put a plow in front of, and that was because his vehicle was 78, was it, or
That's correct,
78, and it was completely out of commission and never to return to use. We have middle of the winter, beginning of the winter last year, we talked a little bit about retrofitting one of our sanders with a ground speed control application rate control system. When we ended up dealing directly with the vendor for that, we found out that the lead time on that was really going to push us to the end of the winter season. It was a 12, 16-week lead time. So we didn't end up pulling the trigger on it last winter because it would have served us no good. And we were already spending a lot of money on snow-related activities, and it wasn't going to help us save any money last year. Right. So we decided to back off on that for last year. But now that we've got into this year and into this fiscal year budget, we are probably within a day or two getting ready to send truck number 5, which is our newest dump truck, to the equipment supplier to retrofit it with a control point ground speed control system and an application rate control system. So we'll be ready for this season. And then last, I did want to note that Mark Langone has gone through his first round of cross-connection inspections and will schedule his second round of inspections this fall. And there are some devices that have to be inspected twice per year and some devices that only need to be inspected once per year. So the first round of inspections is the lengthier round of inspections. The second round is the reduced pressure backflow devices, that the more sophisticated devices that need to be inspected twice per year. The check valves that only need to be inspected once per year are done at this point. So we're in good condition across connection, which is good because it puts Mark in a good place so he can help out John and others on some of the things like the transfer station and other things.
So the second round is smaller?
It's shorter and faster, yes.
That's a good terminology, shorter and faster.
Shorter and faster, and it's good to get the more difficult round out of the way first, and the easier round is better to defer that. And it's sort of fitting it in between peak summertime when everybody's busy and wintertime when everybody gets busy, and the schedule's really driven by storm response. So it's typically when it has fit in pretty well into the year. And I think with that, I'm done speaking for myself and Bruce and Dan. So I'll let John speak now.
I guess I'll start with the 4th of July parade. It went really well. By appearance with the center field, it looked like it was beaten up pretty bad, but in reality it was not. There were very few, if any, divots in the field. It held up real well. It's already greening up as we speak. I mean, within a week, with the rain we've had, it's such a resilient field. So there wasn't a lot of damage there. There were no surprises with the parade. The guys that came in did a great job cleaning up between the fireworks and the parade, and then again after the parade. So everything went really well.
I think based on guests at the last meeting, I just want to make public that the pre-parade, pre-4th of July, 4th of July, after fireworks, after parade, and, you know, beyond, everything from my perspective was done really well. I mean, the grass in the center was cut down nice and trim, you know, for the 3rd and 4th of July. After the fireworks, the place was cleaned up. After the parade, the place was cleaned up, so
The guys did a really
I
nice
mean,
job. They did.
kudos to everybody, you know, to take care of that part of our town and do a good job. And in the meantime, it looked like the fields were still getting maintained too, so
And they were.
good
They
work.
were, yeah.
Good work.
Thank you. Mr. Perrin had mentioned the milling on Maple Shade, and we were able to take some of those millings to Watchwog Pump Station Road, which floods out, which is muddy, sometimes almost impassable, and fill a lot of that area with the millings to firm it up, and that went really well. I think that we brought enough material in there to really impact that long-term, you know, and I drove down this afternoon and it was flawless. I mean, it was without a bump on that road. It really made it.
Well, that's
it was
gotta help
nice.
a lot, huh?
It did, and we also were able to bring some up to Pine Knoll. Now, we stockpiled a bit up there, a couple truckloads, not enough to do the driveway, but that's our goal, to do that driveway next with the millings. And again, that will be a big impact for that entrance. We spend a lot of time going up there, leveling that driveway out. Every time we have heavy rain, we have to go up the next day. It's on the schedule now, it's a no-brainer. Cars have a difficult time navigating that hill. It washes out, and this should be a real good, solid fix for that.
And the thought is, as the board may remember, we are milling Prospect as well, and we'll bring similar volume of millings, if not greater, off of Prospect. We wanted to push Pine Knoll off a little bit, one, because they're really in the peak of their season right now. To do it right, we really need to get out there, get a bulldozer in there for a couple of days, probably even cut the grade down a little bit to make some space for the millings, and then bring the millings in, and felt it was really better to spend some more time to get ready for it. And then two, do it at a time which would be less impact to the activities up at Pine Knoll. And that'll be, you know, most likely happening probably mid to late August at this point when things are starting to taper off there.
Our last meeting, we talked about work orders and how we had been set back a bit from the extended winter, and we were. One of the benefits was the money that we received for the blacktop pothole money. It went a long way, but in concentrating on that up front, we kind of fell off a little bit on some other things, and we were already behind, but we've done a good job, I think, in catching up with the things that we were a little sluggish on as far as getting to. And the fields, cutting the fields wasn't necessarily one of them. That was more of an equipment issue, but the parks are in good shape right now, I think very good shape. The roads as well, we're getting there. I think the biggest complaints that we have coming in are the roads that we have targeted to be paved. They're the outstanding roads that, you know, so that's something that's going to come a little bit with time. We're doing berm right now, and there's a lot of berm that's missing. So we are getting caught up in those areas, and in a good fashion there. We're getting ahead of the curve a bit there. We finished up for water installation. We finished up on Millbrook and Hunting Road. We were out today pulling the hydrants. I don't believe we pulled them all. I believe there's 2 more that have to come out. Aside from that, the water's in, on, running. The street's been blacktopped. Catch basin down at the end was repaired. That was an issue by one of the tie-ins. I believe all the looming and seeding is complete. The only thing we'll have to go back is when we pull these hydrants, we'll have to loom and seed those areas. So we've made decent progress there. We have Mr. Parent at our last meeting. I hope it was our last meeting, not just earlier. So, we have some work to do at the high school. There's a walkway that goes around the stadium field, and it's just on the outside of the fence, and people stand there to view the game, and there's a bit of a drop off behind it. We're going to build that back a bit and try to double that sidewalk up, so there's a little more room there, a little less room for error as far as somebody falling off the grade there. Sure. And we intend to do that this week, starting tomorrow, hopefully. And when we finish that up, we are determined to get out to Parker Street and wrap up that sidewalk job. Again, we have vacations. This is a busy time of year as far as people going on vacations. But again, we've been very productive and things are going very well.
How many feet of sidewalk are left on Parker Street? You know?
I don't, off the top of my head. It's, if you broke it into thirds, I'd say a third,
Third of it?
you know.
That's kind of what I thought.
But the last stretch is probably the most challenging time. We have probably the only real difficult area as far as, it's very narrow. We're gonna have to remove some bushes and things like that. There's a bit of a pitch. We're gonna have to maybe put a bit of a head wall in of some sort going past this person's house. He's very nice, very cooperative. He's not having an issue with it at all.
That's good.
So that's gonna take some thought, but it's certainly not something it's something we can do easily enough to get this thing wrapped up.
One thing that's helped on cleanup, and something that Mr. Collins, in fact, that John had brought forward, was we had the opportunity, we have 2 pumping station operators. We have a head pumping station operator and a pumping station operator. And our pumping station operator is, the title is pumping station operator, but he's really classified, paid as a foreman. So what we've been able to do and really do double duty is that we have one relatively new staff member who came to us with some pumping station experience. We, thought good things about the experience, but until we could actually, put him out there, test him and try him, we didn't really have a good understanding of what that experience really meant. We also, when we made some modifications to the job descriptions for the pump station operators, we made it specific as part of the contract that we would and the union agreed to allow us to train a backup operator, not somebody that would have the title operator, but a skilled worker that we could rotate in on an emergency basis to fill in that position. So really we've done 2 things right now. We've been able to take our operator, not a head operator, and put him in a foreman position with a crew filling in when people are on vacation and things like that. And then also take one of our skilled workers who we felt had some good experience but really hadn't tested that experience, and put him into the pumping stations and really team him up with our head operator. And both of those things seem to be going pretty well.
Very well. I'd like to actually maybe expand upon that. Darrell Keene is the pump. I hate to say maybe it's the right thing or wrong thing to say by name, but he's the individual that came out, has been filling in as a supervisor, and he's done an outstanding job. We had him out on Maple Shade. He has a background at Blacktop. He worked for Acme, I believe. I couldn't remember what we were talking about the other day, paving, and he's a bright kid. He's doing a very nice job with the crew that's worked for him. They've been productive, and everything's going very well. It's been a real plus.
Good.
And he'll be our eyes on the ground when we're doing the actual paving activities out there. So he knows better than probably any of the other guys in terms of what Lane should be doing, and just having somebody there that knows what he's doing and keeping an eye on things, will help to ensure the quality as we move forward.
Awesome.
New guy in the pump station? The new guy?
New guy,
He's working well?
working very well.
He's doing
Yeah.
a nice job too. I should have probably expanded upon that. He's done a nice job, very good job.
Everything we'd expected, so it's a good
Yeah.
thing. You don't know sometimes until people actually get tested and tried. And from both sides, the head operator has good things to say. We've seen good things, so I think it's giving us some redundancy now. For instance, that as we had a couple of years ago, our head station operator was out on leave for 3 months or so at one point, and our second operator had to work 24/7, not 24/7, but 7 days a week basically, because we had no backup at that point. This will give us some backup, and also some ability to grow people into roles in the future as well.
Absolutely.
Excellent.
I think that's all I have here.
Okay. Any other business?
No.
Anything? Anything?
Nothing else.
Need to schedule another meeting? This might be a 3-week gap from the... Yeah, I'm into the 10th, 11th, 12th.
It's forward.
Is it? Let's see. Let me look at this.
2 weeks would be the 27th or 28th.
Right,
Yeah, I'm gonna have to miss one probably, just because of my schedule. Today's the
Yeah.
13th,
Right.
27th.
Go back to Tuesday.
I'm not here the 27th.
28th, 28th.
Not here that week or the following week. But that doesn't mean you guys can't have it.
Want to go to the 28th and get back on that schedule?
Work.
28th work for you, Tuesday?
Trying to figure this phone out to change them. I'm gonna throw it against the wall over there.
Easy, Tom.
Easy, easy. The 28th.
Yep.
Okay, 5 o'clock.
5 o'clock?
Okay.
Okay.
I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to adjourn?
Second the motion.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you.